Hello multi-malt missers, I'm Ralphie. This is Ralphie Review 904 on the channel called Ralphie.com, the home of unconventional, unorthodox, quality spirit reviews. Mainly, I have to add, single malt Scotch whisky. And a big thank you to Ayr Santa for that malt mention. And this is the whisky I'm reviewing for you today. And it's a curiosity. I bought this because I was scanning through what was available in the shops online, and I came across this and it aroused my curiosity. And I have to say, in relation to the price I paid for this, I am not disappointed. Let me give you the information on this Glenmorangie single malt. It is 13 years old. It was distilled in 2006. It was matured in Madeira casks for full maturation. So this isn't a Madeira cask finish. It's stating on the label full maturation, which I'm going to interpret as the fact that the spirit has spent 100% of his time in ex-Madeira casks. There's been a small number of casks involved, resulting in a small batch, which at the moment is a bit of the one-off, but I hope they do it again, because I've never been disappointed in a Madeira cask single malt whisky yet. And in my extras coming along shortly, I'm going to be discussing the different styles of casks out there and what they bring to whiskies. But let's not jump ahead of ourselves. We've got more information to provide you from the label. It's limited to 1,140, about steampunker, 1,468 bottles. So this isn't a single cask whisky, there's a small number of casks, and it's a UK exclusive bottling. In other words, it's only available for sale in the United Kingdom, the British Isles, which is a real nuisance if you're watching this video and you're not in the UK and you're saying, well, how do I get myself a bottle of this? And the answer quite simply is, first of all, you check at what's available where you are that's an exclusive to your area. So if you're in the US, you look for exclusive bourbons to the state that you're in the US. If you're in one of the Caribbean islands, you have a look for the rums that are only available where you are. If you're in Canada, you have a look for Canadian whiskies which are only available where you are. And let me tell you now malt mates, there's more and more of this happening. So I'm reviewing this partly to communicate with you what's unusual and one-off where I am, so as that you're more aware to look out where you are as to something similar. Now, the reason that it's a UK exclusive only is because if you've only got short of 1,500 bottles, there's so few involved that it's hardly worth the additional expense of having a distributor export it to other countries, particularly at the moment when exportation is so mired in bureaucracy and sluggishness. I mean, there's a real issue, by the way, with world shipping at the moment of how long it's actually taking goods to be delivered to the destination. It's a big problem. And so you have distilleries where they have a relatively small batch of their product, a junior version of what they produce, small batch version. They're saying, well, we'll just keep it for the local market as something different. And this is exactly what Glenmorangie have done. Natural colour, non-chill filtered, 46.3%, and full maturation in a Madeira cask. Malt mates, I love Madeira casks. I've never had a bad one yet. What swung it for me is the price of this, the fact that it was an integrity bottling, and thirdly, the fact that it was Madeira cask, full maturation. That's what sold me this bottle. Not particularly expensive, interesting. What are my expectations? Well, I don't set my expectations too high. I just leave my expectations open-ended so as to be available to experience the smell, experience the taste, and not be too judgmental about it. A 90 out of 100, is it a 5-star stellar single malt? No, absolutely not. And I haven't bought it or attempted to buy it as such, and I'm not going to review it as such. I'm reviewing this as a suddenly appearanced, non-advertised, unpromoted, eccentric bottling from a single malt distillery I don't normally pay much attention to, which I was really curious about. Smell. Fresh. Slightly toffeed, but not too sweet. It's a light whisky. Glenmurray's are light whiskies. They're relatively simple whiskies. They're not noted for the complexity. I anticipate that, so I'm not disappointed. In fact, I'm actually really quite enjoying it because it's completely unpretentious. It's not a whisky where you have to spend time lingering and loitering to discover the complexities, depths and flavours. It's not that style at all. This is an easy sipping, unusual version where if you're into Madeira casks and experiencing the influence of Madeira casks on a relatively light whisky, you're going to be very pleasantly surprised. The Madeira casks, clean as a whistle, excellent casks. I recognise the smell of the Madeira because when you're buying ex-Madeira casks in the UK at the moment, a lot of them are kind of similar. They're relatively expensive. You're looking about 450, even £500 for a cask. So they're far more expensive than a standard bourbon cask. But you're getting that Madeira thing, which is the richness of sherry, but the dryness and the soft tannins in the finish. So a sherry style sympathetic influence, but not that overcoat effect that you get particularly from PX sherries, and certainly not that added sweetness thing. Quite closed up at the moment. I'm going to have a wee sip and then I'm going to add a drop of water, but not too much. Very sweet and sour with the emphasis in sour. A sour, almost rice wine vinegar arrival. Gingery, vanilla, that mild toffee, really interesting. It's not confectionery toffee. It's more a sort of, how do I explain it? A slightly savoury toffee note. You have to drink Madeira to actually get your point of reference, and I recommend when you're buying Madeira, don't buy Blandies. It's far too generic. Go for Henrik or some of the smaller Madeira houses, or even better, visit Madeira. Madeira is a fascinating destination. Now, excuse me, I've got a wee lump of soot, goodness knows where it came from, in my water jug. And I have to fish it out. That's on the spoon, that's better. I've added about 2.5 millilitres of water. Not a lot. This is a light whisky. It's 13 years old, so it's got quite a lot of spirit-driven content in it, and it will take more water. But being a lighter whisky, if you add just a fraction too much, the poor thing's going to drown. You've lost the flavour of the whisky. You've lost the influence of the cask as well. Coming back to the nose, that beautiful savoury raisin note that you get from Madeira casks. Being light, the cask is prominent. Being fully matured in ex-Madeira casks, emphasises that prominence of the cask. The actual wood from the cask isn't particularly visible. It's more the previous content, that Madeira thing, and it works very, very well with a light whisky because, to a certain extent, the Madeira dominates. Now, if I was to add just a drop of Madeira from a bottle to this, it wouldn't quite work. It needs the interface of the cask maturation to actually do it properly. So, not a stellar whisky. It is simple. I'll come back to this shortly, but it's fascinating. Nose, very fresh, vibrant, summer days. Sultana, that Madeira toffiness, very elegant. The style is very elegant. Uncomplicated in the nose, yeah. Two-dimensional, not quite, but it's getting there. Two-dimensional as an undiluted, without adding water, it's going to be a little bit two-dimensional, but adding a drop of water, not much, just tips the balance in favour of complexity. Taste. Much more dramatic in the arrival. Much more flavoursome. That sourness has been kicked off the arrival to reveal the beautiful grain-led soft summer fruit notes and vanillas that you get from Glenmorangie as a signature. Beautifully delivered here because it's very much intact due to the slow nature of the Madeira cask's influence on the whisky. So at 13 years old, it's got the vibrancy of a 10-year-old Glenmorangie. But it's more than that. There's something subtle, something delicate about it. Whilst it remains a relatively young whisky, the Madeira cask is just bringing extra flavour into the mix, which beautifully complements the single malt. It also makes the arrival more complicated. It extends the development on the palate, and it adds some beautiful, soft, slightly viscous tannins into the finish, along with a little bit of lemon oil and a slight gingeriness. And a hint of mint as well. Some might describe it as eucalyptus, but it's slightly softer than that. I would describe it more as bay leaf. Having said that, I recommend you chew a bay leaf, because it's absolutely an incredible flavour. But it's a very kind of mild version of that. So you have a simple whisky, simple single malt, as is Glenmorangie's style. And that simplicity is delivered beautifully. So as regards a result, a fantastic whisky, but no way could you give it 90 out of 100. It's not that good. This is more of a mid-80s whisky. I'll come to the malt mark shortly, but although it's not a particularly high mark, it is a particularly good whisky for different reasons. It's not a sherry bomb. It's not a peat monster. It's not a marvellously complex event. It's just a simple whisky delivered beautifully due to the integrity of the bottling, the integrity of the presentation, the clear disclosure on the label, which is so refreshing, and it just gives a complete final result thanks to some good, clean, juicy Madeira casks. Just gives you a lovely single malt experience, which to a jaded old palate like I've got, it actually makes a very pleasant change. It's not something that I have to examine forensically. It's quite simple and it's quite delightful. Final taste before the malt mark. Give it a bit more time in the glass. Minute in the glass for each year in the cask. You know the drill. And the arrival just becomes a bit more energised. You get a slight confectionery note creeping in, but not quite. So although this whisky continues to develop, it's nothing dramatic. Nothing at all about it is dramatic. It's all subtle and slight and gentle and soft and effervescent. And this, for me, makes this a delightful single malt to buy if you're in the UK. There's less than 1,500 bottles for this because it's a small batch eccentric bottling. So you will not find it out with the UK, but look around you wherever you are and see what you've got in your state, in your city, in your neighbourhood, in your country, wherever you are, that I couldn't possibly buy where I am, because you've got plenty of options. And there's more of these appearing. And I think that for Glenmorangie, this has been just an experimental small batch using Madeira casks, which maybe they've not used predominantly in the past. They're just getting their bearings, they're doing the experiments, they're putting it out there, they're gauging how well it sells, they're gauging the reaction from the feedback that they get primarily online, from reviewers and such. And they're saying, shall we do this again? And the answer to Glenmorangie is, yeah, do it again. Absolutely. Cheers. So lovely little bit of Scotch mist in there. Lovely little bit of Scotch mist. Tangy. Refreshing, zesty. Very enjoyable actually. 85 out of 100. That, malt mates, is an Integrity malt mark. Sometimes when we pour a dram, what we're really looking for is something that's genuinely a little bit different. Something that we smell and taste that we can say, that's not like anything I've had for a few years. And that's what makes the whisky. That's what makes the experience. That is the reward that we get for buying into the bottling, for checking out other reviews and even maybe taking a chance. Not paying too much for the bottle, but once we get it, being patient with it. This isn't for a swigging session. This is one just to savour with a few close friends or on your own, in some quietness, as you contemplate the quality of life that we all get from these better malt moments. I'm Ralphie. Join me again shortly for Ralphie Review 904 Extras, in which I'll be just having a little monologue, a little chat to you about all these different casks and how they affect whiskies, because more and more we're getting more and more choice. It used to be bourbon and it used to be sherry, and then occasionally you'd get something port, but Madeira casks, Marsala casks, Malaga casks, red wine, white wine, sweet wine, dry wine, champagne, where does it end? I'm Ralphie, thanks for watching.